When the police entered the house, which was filled with a foul odor, the scene that greeted them shocked everyone. When the police entered the house, the foul odor that wafted out hit them like a solid wall, nearly bringing the officers to their knees. The air was thick, saturated with a stench of decay and something far more sinister, almost alive in its malevolence. What they discovered inside left even the most seasoned among them shocked and speechless. Mike had been a lifelong resident of Laredo, Texas, a quiet man who kept to himself. For 3 decades, his unremarkable life had played out against the backdrop of his familiar neighborhood. That all changed 2 years ago when a new neighbor moved into the vacant house next door. The man, roughly Mike's age, seemed normal enough at first, albeit peculiar in his habits. He appeared only on Saturdays, staying no longer than an hour before vanishing again. Mike found the behavior odd, but chalked it up to the quirks of city life. People came and went, and everyone had their secrets. But the neighbor's sudden disappearance after 2 years of his strange ritual caught Mike's attention. Saturdays came and went, yet the man's car never pulled into the driveway. The house, shrouded in darkness, began to exude an eerie aura of abandonment. It wasn't until one windless night, when Mike went to shut his window, that the smell hit him, a vile, sour odor that churned his stomach and pricked at his instincts. Alarmed, Mike called 911. When the police arrived, they didn't expect to stumble into a nightmare. The inside of the house was more than neglected, it was overrun. The walls were smeared with dirt and strange marks, and the floors seemed alive, pulsating with movement. As they pushed further inside, the source of the smell became horrifically clear. One room, locked from the inside, required a crowbar to force open. What they uncovered was beyond comprehension. The room teemed with life or death, depending on how one viewed it. Thousands of scorpions crawled across the floor, walls, and ceiling, their glossy black bodies glinting under the beam of flashlights. The sound of their movement, a faint yet sinister chittering, filled the air like an unsettling symphony. In the center of the room stood a massive metal cage, inside which lay piles of decomposing scorpion carcasses, their stingers curled into eternal stillness. In one corner, a smaller box contained live specimens. These scorpions were unlike anything the officers had seen before, larger, fiercer, their pincers more robust and their stingers sharper. They moved with an unsettling grace, their bodies seemingly attuned to the oppressive darkness as if they had claimed dominion over this forsaken place. The investigation uncovered the bizarre truth. The mysterious neighbor, once a renowned scorpion breeder, had built an empire supplying pharmaceutical companies and research institutions with rare venom. Scorpion venom, often dubbed liquid gold, was highly sought after for its medicinal properties, fetching astronomical prices in the right markets. But as competition grew and regulations tightened, the man's business crumbled. Desperate to recover his fortune, he resorted to illegal breeding and trading. He transported his scorpions to the house in a last-ditch effort to rebuild his empire in secrecy. However, his spiraling debts caught up to him, and he was arrested for financial crimes. What no one knew was that his arrest left the scorpions behind, forgotten and unchecked. Over time, the resilient creatures thrived in their new environment, evolving in isolation, their population exploding as they claimed the house as their own. The house was deemed too hazardous for further inspection and was quarantined indefinitely. But even as the property was boarded up and warnings were posted, rumors began to spread among the locals. Some swore they saw shadows moving behind the windows late at night. Others claimed the scent of decay still lingered on the wind during particularly humid evenings. And Mike, though deeply shaken, couldn't help but wonder, were the scorpions truly confined to that house, or had their dark empire already begun to spread? Months passed, but the memory of that dreadful night lingered in Mike's mind like a splinter he couldn't remove. The house next door, now a cordoned-off zone, seemed to breathe its own sinister life. Even as official vehicles stopped visiting and the police tape grew faded and frayed, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. The neighborhood began to change. birds that once chirped cheerfully at sunrise had fallen silent. Small animals, rabbits, squirrels, even the occasional stray cat seemed to vanish without a trace. Mike told himself it was paranoia, a product of his overactive imagination, yet deep down, he knew better. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mike noticed movement from the corner of his eye. His heart skipped a beat as he peered out his window. The house next door, long thought abandoned, was illuminated by a faint, flickering glow. It wasn't the artificial light of a bulb, but something organic like fireflies or bioluminescent creatures. Summoning his courage, Mike decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and a sturdy broom for protection, he crept out into the cool night air. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, the silence punctuated only by the crunch of gravel beneath his feet. As he approached the neighbor's property, the foul odor returned, stronger and more pungent than ever. The fence surrounding the house had gaps where boards had been pried loose, as though someone or something had been coming and going. With trembling hands, Mike slipped through an opening and stood in the overgrown yard. The light he'd seen from his window emanated from a cracked basement window, casting an eerie, greenish glow onto the weeds and dirt. Mike hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but his curiosity outweighed his fear. He pushed open the back door, which creaked ominously on its hinges, and stepped inside. The house felt alive, the walls pulsated with the same faint glow he'd seen outside, and the chittering sound of scorpions was louder than he remembered. The air was heavy with moisture, making it difficult to breathe. As Mike descended the stairs to the basement, the glow intensified, revealing a horrific sight. The basement was a labyrinth of glass enclosures, each teeming with scorpions, but these were no ordinary creatures. Their bodies were grotesquely large, their stingers dripping with a phosphorescent substance that glowed like molten emerald. Web-like structures of hardened venom crisscrossed the room, forming intricate patterns that seemed almost intentional. It was as if the scorpions had developed a collective intelligence, transforming the basement into a hive. In the center of the room stood a grotesque throne-like structure, fashioned from hardened venom and scorpion exoskeletons. Upon it perched a scorpion unlike any other, massive, with a crown-like growth on its head. It was a queen, its movements slow and deliberate, its eyes glinting with an unnatural awareness. Mike froze, paralyzed by the realization that these creatures had become something more, something evolved. As he turned to flee, the queen let out a high-pitched chitter, a sound that pierced the air like a blade. Instantly, the swarm responded, their bodies shifting in unison toward Mike, their pincers snapping. He bolted up the stairs, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The chittering grew louder, closer as the swarm pursued him. Bursting through the back door, he sprinted across the yard, ignoring the branches that tore at his skin. He didn't stop running until he reached his own house, slamming the door behind him and locking it. Gasping for breath, Mike peered out the window. The neighbor's house was dark again, as if nothing had happened. But he knew what he'd seen. The scorpions weren't just surviving, they were preparing. For what? He couldn't say, but the realization chilled him to the bone. As days turned into weeks, reports began to surface of similar occurrences in nearby areas. The smell, the glow, the disappearance of animals, it was all spreading. Mike knew the scorpions weren't contained to the house anymore. They were moving, expanding their territory. He tried to warn the authorities, but his claims were dismissed as the ramblings of a paranoid man. One night, as Mike lay in bed, the chittering sound returned, louder than ever. This time, it wasn't coming from the neighbor's house, it was coming from inside his own walls.